Welcome to Beyond the Whistle, the official podcast of the NHSCA. Here we go past the highlights and explore the stories, lessons, and voices shaping sports today. Whether you're a coach, athlete, or fan, this is your inside look at the game outside of the arena. In our very first episode, I talk with Bob Ferrara Sr. and Jr. Bob Sr. gives the story of how NHSCA was created, and he looks back at what's been built since the very first wrestling tournament that spawned an impactful business. Then we talk to Bob Jr., who has now taken over for his father as the CEO, and he discusses the future of the company and how the mission has shifted with the times, but is fueled by the same ambition and goals it's had since its inception. So let's get started. I'm really happy to have the man that created NHSCA on with me today. And before we even jump into the hurdles that he faced and anything else, let's go right to day one of what made you start NHSCA and where was the motivation to do it?
It's kind of a crazy story, Ryan, quite honestly. I wouldn't let my son, he was interested in wrestling when he was a little kid because he was always around it. I was the coach at Bucknell at the time, and he always would come into the practice and whatever. Then I would start bringing him to camps, but I told him he couldn't wrestle competitively until he was in seventh grade. So I kind of held him back. He was well skilled, always wanted to wrestle. I wouldn't let him. I said, no, not till seventh grade. So then after his seventh and eighth grade middle school years, and he had a lot of success, I said, okay, I'm gonna find a tournament to get you ready for high school for the next level. So the only tournament I can find was the Keystone Games. And so I said, let's go up and you enter it and see what you can do. So in the finals, he was wrestling this kid, and I could tell the kid was good, but the kid fell right into Bobby's style. So Bobby was able to put him on his back a few times, and he ended up beating the kid 9-1 and won the Keystone Games. And then the kid's name was Ray Brinzer, kid from North Allegheny, who went on to win 3 state titles and many-time All-American. And so then Bobby wrestled his high school career and had a lot of success, 2-time state champion. I said, look, I'm going to find a tournament to get you ready for college. So I contacted everybody, USA Wrestling, AAU. They had nothing scholastic style going on. Mm-hmm. So I said, I'm going to start one. So the stipulation, in order to qualify, you had to be a senior in high school, and you had to win at least 1 state title along the way. And the reason I did that, Bobby won a state title his sophomore year, and then he got beat as a junior. And then I'm thinking, I'm not going to do all this work, and if he doesn't win it his senior year, he won't be here. So I said, sometime during your career, you had to win a state title. And so a lot of kids benefited by that, by the way, because there were kids that showed up at the tournament that didn't win it their senior year, but did win it previous to their senior year. So we go out. Now I'm trying to organize this thing. I said, well, let's find a place. Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh sounds like it's in Pennsylvania. Ohio people can come. That's a good state for wrestling. And it's not too far from the southern states. So I thought the location was good. It was the University of Pittsburgh. And then I made several trips out there by myself just to try to set things up. Meeting with the University of Pittsburgh people, with the arena, all the things that went along with that. And then I started thinking about the hotels. I have to have some meetings for the hotels. So I had a meeting. A friend of mine said the Marriott Green Tree is a great hotel. So I called the guy and I said, listen, we're having this national high school tournament. It's gigantic, and I'm just talking to him. And I said, and we want you to be the host hotel, okay, which guarantees you're going to fill up your hotel. But I said, but I need you to host a lunch and invite at least 10 other hotels at the luncheon. And what I'm going to need from you is I'm going to need 5 complimentary rooms and I'm going to need a total of 25. So I need four other hotels to come up with five complimentary rooms or whatever. So he said, "Oh, okay, sounds good." So I went out, met with the. He did have 10 hotel people there, and as after giving the presentation, I said, "Hey, they're coming from all over the country. We didn't have one kid, we didn't have one kid register." So I said, "They're coming from all over the country, and I think this is going to be the greatest thing that ever hit wrestling, the sport of wrestling." And so I said, I need four other hotels to step up and give me five complimentary rooms each, and you'll be the host hotels. We're not going to have five host hotels. Everyone else is on their own, right? So one guy, kind of a wise guy, raised his hand and he said, "Well, what happens if we don't give you the five complimentary rooms?" I said, "Well, you have 60 hotels here in Pittsburgh. I'll keep knocking on doors until I get the five hotels that I'm looking for." "Oh, no, no." He said, "No, we're in, we're in." So I left there with five hotels giving me five comp rooms, which is what I needed. And I figured we're going to need 8 mats. We're going to need 3 days to run this thing, not having any idea at all, you know, what was really going to happen.
You were really
So then
flying
I got,
blind on this one, huh?
oh, it was crazy. And then I got a little greedy. I once the hotels were in, I called each guy and I said, "Hey, this thing is going great. I appreciate it. What you did at the luncheon that we had, giving us those five compliments. I'm going to be in touch. I think we're going to get national coverage for this, right?" So then I go back and I went to my local cable station and I said, "Hey, do you have the phone number for ESPN?" They said, "Well, why would we have that phone number?" I said, "Well, I pay you my bill. I get a bill from you every month, and ESPN is one of the stations that I'm paying for." I said, don't you know their number?" He said, "No, not offhand." I said, "Well, ask your boss. He probably knows." So he goes in the back and he asked his boss for the number. So I get the number. And back then they had a thing called Scholastic Sports America.
Hmm.
And Dennis Denninger was the host, a guy named Dennis Denninger, right? So I got his number. And then I called out there and I said, "Hey, look, we're having this national high school championship. You have to be a senior, you have to be a state champion. These are the best of the best that the country has to offer." Really hyped it up. And he said, I said, "Would you be interested in covering it?" He said, "Well," he said, "you caught me off guard. Let me do a little research." He said, "I'll get back to you later today." So about 3 hours later, I was in my Bucknell office. He called back. He said, "Listen," he said, we're gonna bring a full crew of 6 people out there to film this thing. And yes, we definitely are going to cover it for you." He said, "And the only reason is I did my research. This is the only true national high school championship in any sport." So I said, "Oh, that's great, you know." So now we got it. Then he says, "And I'm going to bring you, and you're going to have interviewing the kids, Charlene Hawk." Charlene Hawk the year before was Miss America. Now I'm feeling really good about things. And don't forget, we don't have one person registered yet. So now I go back and I call the five hotels. I said, "Hey, listen, things are going really great." I said, "We have ESPN's coming in to cover it. They're going to film the kids as they're coming off the plane, and they're in their hotel room, and then as they come off the mat, it's going to be a full blown broadcast." And oh, they said, "That's great." And I said, "And you're going to get recognition." I said, "But what I need from you is $500 for our ad in the program. We're going to have a program. We're going to put the ad in the program, right?" So I got each one of them to come up with $500. Then I called our host hotel. The real host hotel was Marriott Greentree. Um, Don Andrzejewski was the name of the guy, the general manager. And I said, "Don," I said, "I need the $500 for the program, but I also need you to host a banquet." He said, "How many people?" I said, "Well," I said, let's host it for like, let's look like 200 coaches are going to be at the banquet. So he said, I'll see what I can do. So he comes back a couple days later and said, okay, you got the banquet now. So now we got all the money for the programs, right? We got the 25 comp rooms that we need for the referees and the people that are going to be working the tables. And and now we have the banquet for the coaches. So I said, this is great. Well, it wasn't so great. As it turned out, when I left Lewisburg, thank God, I said that you can register at the door. Back then we didn't have the internet like you have now.
Yeah.
So I'm saying everything was through the mail. And I said, all right, we have these registrations coming in. You can register at the door. So when I left Lewisburg, now we have 8 mats, we have the referees, and we have the mats, the table help, and everything in place. And we only had 55 kids registered for the event. So now we got all the hotels giving us all these all these rooms. We got ESPN coming, for the national event. And so I'm thinking out when we took the drive to Pittsburgh, I'm thinking if we don't get anyone registered for this event, I'm going to have to slow the event down. So I'm going to have 7 warm-up mats and 1 competition mat to slow it down so we could go over a three-day period. Um, we also had Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A came in and sponsored the thing and fed the coaches for the 3 days. They were eating Chick-fil-A stuff for free, right? I got them involved too. So anyhow, I'm driving out there, and thank God we end up with a total of 269 wrestlers, all 1, 2, 3, or 4 time state champs. These are the top recruits in the country, as it turned out, you know. And so I I was fortunate that we were able to fill the match and make it a decent event the first year. We didn't have to slow the tournament down. We just got out a little early in the evening, so everything worked out great. And everyone was a volunteer. Our referees, we had 5 referees of the group that we had of referees. I think we had 16 referees altogether the first year, and 5 of them refereed at the NCAA championships the week before.
Yeah.
And now they're volunteering their time, right? All the table help volunteered. Everyone that worked the event was a volunteer. So, because we didn't have any money. But as it turned out, once we had all those people registered at the door, then I paid the referees like $150 a piece. I paid the table help $100 a piece. And I ended up with $500 left after all the bills were paid, right? So now I'm on my way back to Lewisburg. And by the way, that first event was a great event. In fact, my son ended up winning the event. So he beat a 2 time California state champ named Brett Colombini, who went to Minnesota and had a great college career, 3 time All-American out there. And so come back, I had $500 in my pocket left. So now on Monday, I went to deposit it in the bank. And they said, well, what do you want this under? And I had to think on real quick. And I said, National High School Coaches Association. Um, so that's as crazy as it is. I was forced to come up with a name for that bank account that the $500 was going to be under, and that's how it happened.
As great as everything seemed to pan out of getting the hotels and having the volunteers and having the amount of wrestlers that you had come in, there had to be some hurdles somewhere, right? What were some of the pitfalls? What were some of the hurdles that you had to kind of jump to even make everything happen?
Yeah, it's interesting that you have that insight because there were a lot of hurdles. unfortunately, some of them came from my colleagues, my college coaching supposedly friends. They weren't friends because they got jealous. They thought this gave me a big advantage in recruiting. Yet we had a college recruiting fair. They all showed up and recruited at this event. Then the one guy, that one of the heads of the wrestling association, tells me, "Oh, we're going to shut this down." I said, "Are you?" I said, "How are you going to do that?" He said, "Well, I don't know, but this is illegal." And I said, "Is it?" I said, "I checked with the NCAA. They have no problem with it." But they were trying to shut it down because they thought that this would give me a big advantage in recruiting. Meanwhile, they're there for 3 days talking to all the kids, and there I am working the event. They're the ones recruiting, not me. But yes, that was some of they were some of the hurdles. I can tell you this: the support from the high school community was overwhelming. They said this is exactly what we needed. We can't believe how great, and they officially becomes high school All-Americans because we're the National High School Coaches Association. So we sanction the event. They officially become All-Americans.
Yeah. So as you kind of look at everything that's been built, and as you said, this started as a wrestling event, and to this day that's what people know it as. They know it
Yeah.
as a wrestling event. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of some of those championships back in the day, of the 7-on-7 that we held at those IMG back in, I think, 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
And be a part of some of those things. But why move from wrestling to these other sports? What was the premise of wanting to have these other sports included?
Well, actually, see, we always had a newsletter, and the newsletter went out to 22 sports. So they all knew that we existed. Then
Mhm.
I used to get all kinds of requests from these coaches saying, "Hey, how about our sport? We won a national tournament." And that's how those other things were actually born. So it was basically the feedback that we got. And what people cannot compete with is our coaches and our athletes take ownership of the event. And we, from day one, we would tell them at the banquet, I would tell them, "This is your event. We're just running it for you. So if you have ways of improving it, let me know about it, and we'll try to incorporate it." And that's how the events grew. But really, the most important element was they really felt the ownership of the event. Until this day, they do.
Like you said, you started it to get your son ready for that next level. He ends up
Yeah.
winning the tournament and everything else. But now, and that first year, you didn't just create an opportunity for your own son. You created an opportunity for 269 other wrestlers as well as coaches. But now you're creating opportunities for so many more wrestlers. What does that mean to you, to know that you are in some sense a catalyst for a lot of wrestlers who go unseen during the year? You're kind of a catalyst for their careers at the next level.
I tell you, Ryan, I wish I could take all the credit, but I don't deserve it. We have such an unbelievable staff who does all the work for this. All I do anymore is just shake hands. So I still have a lot of old coaches still coming in, and we have fun together. But the staff that I we have at the NHSCA does miracles, and that's what amazes me the most, is how they were able to bring this event up to the level that it's at.
If you could sum up in a few words of what you've built, and as you look at it now, and as you go and shake hands, and what you hear from these coaches, what would it be to kind of sum up what NHSCA in a nutshell kind of means to you from that first year of only having 7 mats?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to get this in. Cale Sanderson wrestled in this event as well, and of course he won it. And he's been our biggest supporter. I mean, he's been unbelievable with us. And all the big name coaches either wrestled in our individual event or our team championship. Um, again, it's our team that I feel so great about. I think putting the team together, I'll take credit for that, but I cannot take credit for where we are today. What the way I explain it, I built the foundation, and they've they're finishing the palace that they're building, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's an incredible story. I certainly enjoy hearing it, and this is the first time that I am hearing it full out. And as many years as I've been around you, and as many years as our families have been around each other. So I'm looking forward to getting even more stories here on this podcast and really growing everything with that NHSCA has to offer. So I appreciate now coming on and being a part of this, being a part of it for a second time as well, and looking forward to everything that you guys have put together. So I appreciate you talking with me, one, giving the story, but two, talking about the hurdles that you went through and everything else that you've done to build this into what it is. What incredible insight from Bob Sr. as we look back at just how NHSCA got started. Now we turn the page to the mission and the future of what the company holds with Bob Jr. We're sitting here with Bob Jr. and as you look back on the foundation and how NHSCA started, what's it mean to you, as well as how kind of nostalgic does it make you feel to see where it came from, as well as where you guys sit now as a foundation?
Yeah, I guess nostalgia wise, jumping into something that my father started 37 years ago, it's pretty cool, pretty awesome to carry on his vision for what this national high school coaches organization can be. Um, we started as a home for the senior national wrestling tournament, which in its first year had 262 kids. And at the time he left for the venue, pre-internet or pre-email application, I think he had 50 some kids registered. So there was a lot of on-site registrations, thankfully. But, growing from a 262 one event nonprofit company into one that services high school coaches across all sports, across all states. Still maintains a couple of wrestling events. We've run national tournaments over the years in probably 10 different sports. So yeah, from where it started to where it's come, like I'm super proud to carry on that torch and continue to try to grow it.
I want to dig a little bit more into that of how has the organization truly changed from the inception of it?
Yeah, well, pre website
Yeah.
even, and a way for, that just from a technology standpoint, the way we can connect to coaches now versus then is obviously very different. But at one time, we were really heading down this event strategy to connect to coaches and then to introduce them to programs via events. And events are very difficult. Take a lot of effort, a lot of time. There's a lot of players in that space now, right? So when we first did the high school or the senior national wrestling championship, it was a first of its kind. Um, Now there's so many different organizations and players that run national championships. I think the kids have a lot of opportunity to be exposed
Mm-hmm.
now in the different sports. But our focus has really changed over the course of the years to focus on advocating for and to servicing coaches across all sports, to ultimately impact the playing environment for the kids. So um, high school coaches, aside from, a handful of football coaches down south, everyone's out of their pocket to coach high school sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
And aside from their parents, the high school coach might have the most time with the kids. right? Because they're
Yeah.
spending the 2 hours, maybe they have another workout that they're getting in periodically or in the off season. And as best we can support that high school coach to mentor kids or to equip them with answers they may not be experts in within a certain genre of the sport. Um, that's what we want to be. We want to be a resource for coaches to advocate for their programs, but ultimately to impact the environment for the kids that are competing.
Yeah. What have been some of the biggest growth opportunities for NHSCA, even as technology continues to change and exposure continues to change, where have you guys seen the most growth for the organization?
So we have some, there's different ways that we try to work with coaches now. So we have a high school Hall of Fame where we're recognizing the top senior athlete in each sport, at least 22 sports, and the top coaches in those respective sports. So, and our purpose for doing that is to kind of celebrate greatness, let people learn from what examples or how those people approach running a successful program. Uh, we equip coaches with an academic All-American recognition program for their high level student athletes to celebrate, the kids that are doing things the right way. We create education content for coaches to utilize, not technique, not how to run practice. The governing bodies do a great job of that. But how to support a kid who's going through divorce, or
Mm-hmm.
how can coaches navigate, for the select few coaches that have to deal with it at the high school level, various topics. What's the proper hydration level for kids before the sport? The coaches are like expected to know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these coaches, a lot of them in high school, at the high school level, club coaches are a little different, but at the high school level, sometimes they're converted teachers who are filling a spot.
Yep.
And so as best we can equip passionate adults who are trying to impact the environment for the kids positively, that's really what we're here to do.
Yeah. And you've talked about the support that you give coaches and athletes. But I want to dig a little bit into kind of the mission of NHSCA and how is the mission of the entire org fueling all of these different things. You've got the support, you've got the education, you've got the events. How is the mission the basically the linchpin for all of these things?
Yeah, so we're working with coaches, right? So we maintain a database of high school coaches around the country. Um, there's a lot of them. They turn over a lot
Mm-hmm.
frequently. We estimate about every 3.3 years they're turning over. Um, so a new crop of coaches are coming in all the time. A lot of people that are getting involved in high school sports, truly are reaching into their own pocket to do so. They're compromising their careers, compromising time with their own families sometimes. All about impacting the kids that they're involved with. And, a lot of, there's always the nightmare stories, but for the most part, people that are coaching at the high school level are there for the right reasons. So, what we do through webinars, through education content, through newsletters that we distribute out to every high school head coach. We also have insurance for them, for the coaches that train kids in the off season. A lot of times their liability coverage doesn't cover them, in the off season. So our membership carries a liability coverage with it, to protect them and their families, something they may not think about, as an
Mm-hmm.
example. So we're really about working with the coach, equipping them, providing resources for them, advocating them for them at the national level, and just with a mission and with a goal of ultimately positively impacting the environment for the kids on the field or the court or the mat or whatever it may be.
Yeah. And, you turn on the TV or social media or literally any way of getting information these days, and you see the changing formats of sports, whether it's at the high school level, the college level, the professional level, all the, every single platform, and whether it's boys sports or girls sports or, men and women, it's changing. How has NHSCA, I guess, kept their finger on the pulse of that, right? And how have they made sure that they are evolving with the sports that they want to support?
Yeah, I mean, so much of the way coaches, or at least organizations like us, can connect to coaches are using the different platforms, whether they be social media platforms. But you know, kids are challenged with a lot of different things today. It's different. There's a lot of distraction. Back when I'm mid 50s, back when I was coming up through high school, like I grew up in a small town. You played, a bunch of different sports. And your time was, even in the time where you weren't playing sports, a lot of times you were playing pickup games of
Hmm.
different sports. It was just different. You didn't have the distractions like today. But as best we can educate coaches and support them as the kids transition, through time, as the high schools bring different regulations and so forth, there's a support structure already in place for high school sports. The state athletic associations within their respective states, really provide the structure to how the sports are competing, what the rules are, different certifications that some coaches need to go through. That's not what we do. We're just trying to equip coaches with resources that they can pull, learn quickly, pass on to their kids or families, and hopefully create an impact change, for the people that they're touching every day. So
Hmm. And, NHSCA is probably more widely known as a more wrestling organization with the big events that you guys host every year. But by talking to you, you know that it's more than just wrestling. How have you continued to just make sure that people know that it isn't just a wrestling organization and that putting on wrestling events isn't just the only thing that NHSCA does?
yeah, yeah. So definitely wrestling people know us that way. The two events that we run, I think, are important to the fabric of the sport.
Hmm.
At least I hope so. They've grown every year. The high school nationals, we rebranded the senior nationals into high school. It includes all divisions now. But that's grown a lot even recently, more significantly, because I think just because we're not we're not part-timers running a wrestling event. We're we got full-time staff who work on this all year long, and we survey the families that attend the event and try to improve and bring a different dynamic to those events each year. Such a big part of those events, we have a college fair going on, we have clinics going on during the events, celebrity signings type thing. We're trying to make it worthwhile for the 30 kids from Alaska to come there who may not have a ton of success as they come to the event, but the experience of being there, the chance to compete against high level kids across the country, we just try to foster an environment that is a positive environment, and that people want to come back to, and hopefully, we always see it as their event. We're a nonprofit. Um, we're not there to pinch every corner. We're there to provide a first class event for kids to come compete in. And so we do a lot of time listening to our customers. The national duels, that the other event that we do, is obviously a team event,
Mm-hmm.
dual meet style event. That event's hit capacity for the last 6 or 7 years, and again, we know what the event is. It's about seeing who the best club is around the country. The all-star teams kind of prevent us from finding that out sometimes, but it does bring high-level kids there. And but the club programs that come, get that time with their families. They have a schedule that they can spend time with their kids outside of wrestling. And we try to, again, we're listening, we're surveying those coaches every year after the event to see what could be tweaked, what could be better. And we truly do listen to it. It's not, it's, we read every survey, we talk about it as a staff, we make improvements to do that. So the wrestling people know us because we take a lot of care into the two events that we run.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to other sports and the coaches around the country across other sports, our social media bends wrestling heavy at times. We're going to try to correct that, just so they know that this is their place. Again, outside of those wrestling events, which we love and we're super proud of. My goal, and I think the rest of our staff's goal, is to really deliver the organization and be an advocate for coaches across all sports.
Yeah. Something you mentioned at the top of our conversation was, as we are talking about events, is how many more major players are in the space now is something
Mhm.
you mentioned. And, as you look at some of the biggest opportunities for NHSCA moving forward, you also have to pay attention to those major players, to some of those new threats in the space. So, as you guys are making a transition, right, and you're always looking to improve, what would you say are those biggest opportunities, as well as some of the biggest threats to the organization, down the road?
Yeah. So, I think the organization has purpose because of the way high school sports are structured.
Mm-hmm.
So, Federation of High Schools is, quote unquote, the governing body for high school sports in, I think, 43 states now, 43 federated states. So they adopt the rules uh, of the federation within 43 states. And that's kind of how high school sports are governed. So, you know, Ryan and I come from Pennsylvania. The PIAA is the State Athletic Association in PA. They certainly work with their school districts and their member school districts and putting on first class events, but they also are the ones that are making sure coaches are certified. They're the rule making body for the high school
Mm-hmm.
sports world. We're nothing to do with that. We're a national coaching organization. We talk directly to the coaches. We don't go through the state athletic associations. We're talking directly to the coach. So all we're trying to be is support to that high school coach and him making impact. So there's threats within that space. I think the governing bodies sometimes see us as a threat because we're not necessarily utilizing their memberships and so forth. But even though we have the two wrestling events as a great example, we're not a wrestling membership organization. So we don't use USA Wrestling membership
Mm-hmm.
because we're working with coaches across all sports. So, um, I'm sure there's threat, from a national championship standpoint, there's always others running national events, at least within the sport of wrestling. Uh, there's a lot of people that do a great job with that. But, we're just trying to do within wrestling, those two events, we're just trying to do our best job with those two. High school nationals has been around for 37 years. The national duels, 27 years. There are two events that have grown from 262 kids for the high school nationals and 4 teams for the national duels. They've grown from very small events where our founder was keeping kids busy because there was not a lot of wrestling to do.
Yeah.
Grown into these events that hopefully create great opportunities for kids. Like I can remember when I first started working with the organization, again, like maybe 19 years ago, one of my first events there, a kid who was unrecruited at the time came off and won a tough weight class at the senior nationals at the time and was offered a couple scholarships coming right off the mat. I was right there for it. We got to know the kid somehow. We got connected to knowing the kid. And, without that event, they had limited opportunity before that. And
Yeah.
I think that's why the event was started, like to identify those kids. The very first year, 1990, my senior year in high school, there was a 4-time undefeated kid from Wisconsin wrestling a 1-time state champ from Montana in the final. No one was recruiting the 1-time champ from Montana, you know, and he ended up winning in the final and beating the kid pretty good. Super tough kid. And right coming off the mat, earned a scholarship to school, that he would have never seen
Yeah.
other than being there. So I think both events were kind of the first of their kind. There's a lot of competition that enters into the space after that. Wrestling's a competitive sport already, so people like
Hmm.
to compete with the events. But as far as the coaching organization goes, and working with coaches across all sports, like I don't see anyone as competition. We're in the space trying to support coaches, and if we can work with any organization trying to do that, it fits our mission, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm not trying to do something in the face of someone else. I want to give all our services for free as much as possible. That's my goal, is to like just be this resource center for coaches and offer our services for free. And if we can accomplish that and work with others who are doing it, home run. Like
Yeah.
it's not an ego thing for us. It's purely about supporting those coaches and providing a positive atmosphere for the kids. So any organizations who does that, I want to partner with.
Hmm. So now, you say you want to be able to be a resource and give things to the people that are doing the work, right? It's the
Mhm.
respect to the man in the arena type of a mentality that
Mhm.
NHSCA truly has. But if you had unlimited resources, if something was just there's no questions, you could get everything done, maybe wave a magic wand. What's the first thing that you maybe change or expand on so that NHSCA can be even more of a resource for the coaches and the athletes that you guys are looking to serve?
If I could wave a magic wand, I'd have an app in every coaches, athletes, and parents' hands where they can get fact-based answers to questions they have around sports, whether that be what's the proper hydration level before I step on the field, whether that be what sequences should I pass before I return from my concussion, whether that be equipping a coach with um, how do I support a kid who has parents who just got divorced, things that coaches may be uncomfortable with initially or not know the answers for. How do I get a high level kid recruited? Like, so much of that is, it's so rare for a high school coach to have a Division 1 level kid, right?
Mhm.
How do I support that kid if I have them? Like, I don't even know, how to do that as a high school coach typically. And
Yeah.
club coaches are a whole different animal. Club coaches are, there's I worry because clubs are pay to play. A lot of high schools now are pay to play. But by the same token, there's that club structure has a lot of support built into it to get kids to perform at a high level. High school's not so much, and keeping kids active, keeping them involved in sports, all the lessons, all the positive lessons that come out of competing in sports, as much as we can impact that environment.
Yeah.
That we're doing something special then. That's the lessons you get out of sports are irreplaceable. The sacrifice it takes to be successful, um, how to deal with loss, how to deal with success, really, all those life lessons that athletes learn. If we can equip coaches, remove the anxiety out of moments, and give people better information, uh, that's the ultimate goal.
It's been great to hear about the mission and the driving force behind NHSCA, as well as some of the origin stories from that 1990 year and how things started. So I appreciate you sharing that with us today, Bob. And I definitely look forward to having a lot more coaches and athletes on this podcast to hear about their story, to hear about how they foster growth on their teams, as well as build a great culture and community within the four walls of their gyms, or those four lines of a football field, or on a baseball field, or whatever it may be. So like I said, I appreciate you giving a little bit more insight into NHSCA, and I can't wait to have even more of these stories right here on Beyond the Whistle. Thank you for listening and watching Beyond the Whistle. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to like, subscribe, share, and join us every time we go deeper into the world of sports. So keep learning, keep leading, and keep going beyond the whistle. We'll see you next time.